Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show. This is your second Aintree preview as we look ahead to the incredible weekend ahead of us at Aintree Racecourse, culminating with the Grand National on Saturday. I'm your host, George Elek, and I am joined, as I was for the Thursday preview, by oddschecker's very own tipster Andy Holding, and oddschecker betting show regular Rory Delargy joins us as well. We've done Thursday. So if you're watching this and you're wondering where day one is, go and check out the oddschecker YouTube page. You can find it there as well as on the podcast feed as well. We cover the weather forecast there where Andy says it's been raining a fair bit where he is about an hour away from Aintree, but Rory's got moles near the course who say it hasn't rained a bit yet. So we're kind of guesswork in terms of the ground itself, but do check those out as well. And we've done enough of the pleasantries. I know that Andy's doing well. I know Rory's doing well. I know they're both very excited for this. So we're going to get straight into the racing on Friday, recording this at about 12:15 on Wednesday. So final decks are just in. Embryonic markets we're talking through here. So do forgive us if some of these prices do change between now and the time of release. But before we get into it, do download the oddschecker app as ever for the best odds, free bets, place terms, bookie offers, and Andy's tips, as well as all the other tipsters that we have across all the sports straight to the app on the morning of the racing. Right. The 145 is the first race on the day on the Friday. It is the Aldrin Hay and Aintree Handicap Hurdle over 2.5 miles. The massive punt on the last race of the day, of the final day at Cheltenham Heads to Market in Langadan. 7:02 was brought down that day. 7:02. Bookies taking no chances here. Ahead of the opener, Cobbler's Dream 6-1, Highway 102 9-1, Speech Bubble 9-1, Paddy's Motorbike, Balco Coastal, Fidu Dairy all 11-1, Brimfield Berg, Politesse, Tronador all 14-1, 16-1 Bar, 22 set to line up. Andy, as I say, these prices are hot off the press, so could be subject to a fair bit of change. But from what you're seeing at this early stage, who catches the eye?
I usually let the ball try and come onto the bat in these races most of the time without sort of having to delve too deep into horses returning to form and weights and measures and all that. And the one that's snuck in right down the bottom is the one for me here, Peking Rose. Horse that's been very consistent throughout its novice career so far. Just the 4 runs over hurdles, but all of them have been a fairly high standard. He's taken on quite a few hot pots, if you like. He was in a good novice hurdle first time at Ascot beyond Can Do Kid. That race has worked out well. He then won at Newbury next time out. And he got beat by Lacta Constance, horse that Dan Skelton thinks quite a bit of. But that was probably a byproduct of a very, very bad mistake at I think it was the third last when he was still in front. He then took on Gino Bello last time out, back at the Newbury track. And I think Paddy Brennan was soon to accept that he wasn't going to beat Paul Nicholls' charge, probably from 2 down. He loomed up challenging, and there was for a moment that he looked as though he might go by, but the class of the winner just gained the day in the end. But he's come out of that race with a mark of 130. And if you cast him eye back 12 months ago, this horse split Napper's Hill and none other than Stage Star in the champion bumper here. And you look at the horses that were in behind him that day. I mean, it was a very, very good race. I mean, Balco Coastal was well beat when he was favourite. There's been loads of other horses that's coming out of that, such as Fruit and Nut Super 6, Fine Casting, you name it. Mo was absolutely tailed off. It was just a very, very good bumper last year. So the fact that this horse has a spin around the track has got to stand it in good stead. I think stepping up to 2.5 miles is definitely the right thing to do. And as I said, that's the one that just jumps out at me. What price is it? 16-1? Did you say?
16-1. Yeah.
Wow, that does look a big price. I can't see a better handicapped horse than that as far as I could see. So I don't know what Rory thinks, but Peking Rose will do for me.
Peking Rose, the one for Andy at a surprisingly big price, judging by your tone, at 16-1.
Very much so,
Rory?
yeah.
I wouldn't certainly put you off Peking Rose. Got the right kind of profile for this. I quite like Politesse here off what looks a potentially lenient handicap mark. She was a very good bumper mare for Lorna Fowler. Lorna, who's done very well in the last year or two, she had one runner at Cheltenham, Colonel Mustard finishing a very good third in the county hurdle. Politesse in the same colours, well, not the same colours, but in the same owned by the same partnership in different amounts, I guess. she was third to Longhouse Poet and Monkfish in a bumper at Punchestown, and then went on to be second in a Grade 2 event, the Deep Run bumper at Leopardstown. This is a couple of seasons ago, but I mean, the form is very good. She was runner up to a mare called Darling Daughter. The 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th all won next time out. And she's shown useful form over hurdles. Since then, she's gone chasing, and she's kept very good company again. But I don't think she's a natural jumper of fences. She has made a couple of mistakes thus far. She unseated her rider behind Cape Gentleman at Corcoran last seen in October. But she's she's developed pretty well, and I think it's interesting she's back over hurdles, because although she won her novice chase at Punchestown in May, I think she will be a bigger force over hurdles. She's got relatives who've run very well here before. She's got a half sister who runs in the Mayor's Bumper as well, Naughty Ness, who we didn't mention on that, who's got a solid chance. But yeah, she's got a decent record. She handles good ground. She would like a little bit of rain, I think. She doesn't need it hock deep. And the handicapper doesn't have an awful lot to go on with her, and given her a mark of 132, which compares very favourably with her Irish mark. So I don't know whether the British handicapper maybe has a bit of a crush on Lorna Fowler, but Colonel Mustard was able to race off his Irish mark at Cheltenham, and Polly Tess is able to race off just 2 pounds higher than her Irish mark, despite the fact she's completely unexposed over hurdles. So I think she's an interesting contender towards the bottom of the weights there. 10 stone 10, and Conor Orr, who's had a very good time with things recently. Obviously, he rode very well, I thought, at Cheltenham in the county hurdle. And since then, he's, of course, won the Midlands National in screaming colours. So he's a young jockey with a lot of confidence at the moment. And Lorna's used Conor for the last couple of seasons, and he seems to be really blooming as a rider at the moment. So I think she's got a decent chance, and she might just go under the radar as well. She could be a decent price in this contest. The other one I was going to mention was Noel Williams's mare, who will be a little bit down towards the bottom of the weights as well, Speech Bubble. Now, Speech Bubble was due to run in the mare's final at Newbury last week, and she was taken out because of the quick ground. Interestingly, on her penultimate start, she won a qualifier for that final at Newbury, and the mare who won, Largy G, was 17 lengths behind her that day. So that form has already worked out very well. I get the impression if the handicapper had a chance to reassess that, he'd probably put her a few pounds higher as well. So she's on my short list with a fairly lightweight as well.
Which one was that?
That's Speech Bubble.
Speech Bubble. Speech Bubble is just finding the price.
He pulled her out on account of the ground, didn't he?
Speech Bubble 9 to 1.
Yeah. So she would need enough rain to give her a chance here. But of course, Noel knew that he had a good sub in that race, so he might be more inclined to risk her here and good to soft ground.
Yeah, 9 to 1 Speech Bubble, and Politesse, the other one for Rory, is 14 to 1. On then to the 220, the top novices hurdle, and Jonbon is the even money favourite after finishing a distant second, wasn't it, Andy, behind Constitution Hill in the Supreme Novice Hurdle. El Fabiolo 3 to 1, First Street 5 to 1, Surprise Package 10 to 1, Oaken Risk 12 to 1. Vina Adranza 20 to 1, 25 to 1 bar. And it's a difficult one, I guess, isn't it, trying to work out that kind of the form of Jonbon, where he's finished second in a Supreme where the winner looks like something pretty special, but the race wasn't run to those. Jonbon backers would have been particularly happy to see how quickly he went from the front and took on Dysart Dynamo. So how do you view Jonbon as an even money shot here, Andy?
Well, he's obviously had a hard race, whichever way you strip it down. So we can't contradict ourselves and say, well, this had a hard race, that had a hard race, and not deal with him in isolation. Say, oh no, he'll be fine. Do I want to take even money about him? Probably not, but do I expect him to win? Or he's definitely got the standout piece of form to win. When we are dealing with the Supreme Novices, that was freakish in the way it was won. We've talked about Constitution Hill subsequently, suggesting that he's the only horse capable of probably beating Honeysuckle. He's that good, and the time figure was the best of the festival. of all the 28 races run, the Supreme Novices was the standout time figure. So even in getting beat 20 odd lengths, he still comes out well clear of this mob. And that includes Fabiolo, who was very impressive at Tremor. The wise guys will probably be on him because he's obviously fresh, and William Mullins is prepared to throw the dice on a horse who has been targeted at spring festivals specifically. But look, Jonbon doesn't have to get embroiled in what he did in the Supreme Novices. There's no way that scenario is going to happen again, where he's chasing a suicidal pace, and obviously he was the main one that paid for it. But look, he still beat the rest fair and square, and despite chasing that ridiculous pace, I just think he's a very, very classy horse. And yeah, like I say, he's not my kind of bet. He's just not my kind of horse I want to be lumping on at even money. But do I want to be opposing him with anything in particular? Being a time figure man, I can't come on here and say, well, this has got about 20 spots to find, but I think it'll turn. I think it's good enough to beat Jonbon, because it just isn't in my nature to do that either. So I'll probably sit it out and hope that Jonbon wins to boost the form of Constitution Hill.
Stop Press. Andy Holding sits out a Novice Idol. Stranger things
just
have
on
not
a
happened.
just on account of price, really.
Yeah, no, it's definitely much rather you come on here and be honest about the way you see things rather than putting up something you wouldn't back yourself. Rory, how do you see this?
I wouldn't massively disagree with Andy on that. Although I would ask, how does in terms of your time figures, how much do you have First Street having defined?
Not an absolute massive chasm. I mean, he's running the Betfair. The Glory and Fortune did 77 when he won 76 when he won the Newbury race. So he comes out as running sort of 74, 75 and finishing second. Whereas Jonbon comes out similar on his run beyond Constitution Hill. Yeah. So there's not a huge amount of difference actual on a pure number, as it were. But it was just the fact that he was involved in such a strongly run 80. It was an 83 on 84 that we awarded Constitution Hill. So that he obviously he went through the ceiling and beyond. And because he paid for running in that kind of level of competition, you'd upgrade him.
You'd upgrade his figure, yeah. Just in case of whether it's left a mark on him. I thought I thought First Street was a decent each way bet on this race. Not that I expect him. I wouldn't make a case to say that he should be beating Jonbon, but his form is rock solid. He's been placed in the two strongest handicap hurdles of the season, in the Betfair Hurdle and the County. And the County Hurdle winner is a Grade 1 horse, isn't he?
Oh,
he's going to be a hot favourite for a Grade 1 next time he runs. So to finish second off a mark of 142 was a very good performance. He's pretty easy to place in a race. He's come home well, both at Newbury and at Cheltenham. I can't see him not running his race, and you get your money back if he finishes second or third. So he looks like a fairly boring, obvious small each way play in that contest.
That was the fastest handicap hurdle of the week, by the way. I think one of the fastest handicap full stop, that county hurdle. So there's definitely no negatives for as I can see with that.
Yeah, the form. I mean, I'm a big fan of Colonel Mustard. I thought he ran an absolutely smashing race, did everything right, and just found a horse who's clearly a Grade 1 horse too good for him. And for First Street to split the pair, I thought that's unimpeachable form. So he's bound to be there or thereabouts here.
And West Cork didn't do the form any harm, did he? There on Saturday.
No, not at all. Not at all. I thought he might bounce from that, but he actually ran a pretty good race again. So that just backs it up.
First Street, the one there for Rory to have a small each way bet at 5-1. So as he says, money back if First Street finishes in the 3. Of course, copying a nice winner if he finishes in front. On then to the 2:55, the third race of the day, and it is the Mildmay Novices Chase, where Bravemansgame and Presse. This is a titanic battle between two of the most exciting chasers in the game at the moment. 5-4 Bravemansgame, Presse 6-4, and don't forget, of course, about Ahoy Senor 5-1. The third favourite here, with Fury Road making up the 4 here at 14-1. Rory, no shortage of quality despite just 4 runners here. Are you seeing this as a match between the two? You were sweet on Ahoy Senor's potential going forward in the Cheltenham preview.
Yeah, Ahoy Senor did well to finish within 3.5 lengths of Presse, giving he made mistakes at every ditch. at Cheltenham. Essentially, I think there was one ditch he jumped okay, but essentially every time he saw a ditch, he seemed to frighten the life out of himself and made a mistake and lost ground. Either got in, he can clearly see they're different to other fences, and it seems to confuse him. So he puts the brakes on a little bit into his ditches. I thought he ran very well in the circumstances, and I retain faith in Ahoy Senor that he can do a lot better when everything clicks. But I'd have to say you can't help but be impressed by Presse. And we've got the wrong favourite here. There's no way Bravemansgame should be favourite ahead of Presse, in my view. And I like Bravemansgame. I wouldn't want to knock him at all. But while his jumping is generally very good, and he went up against Itchy Feet at Haydock in November and jumped him silly, and then he jumped Ahoy Senor largely silly at Kempton. I think Presse is just a better jumper than him because he's very quick through the air, and he's also very quick away from his fences. And that's probably the one negative with Bravemansgame. He's very good in the air, and your eye tends to be taken by the shape he makes over his fences. But he's not super quick away from them. It's not a major problem, and obviously he's won all his starts over fences to date. And he looks good in doing it. But you look at Presse's jumping, the ground he gains in the air, he's able to take off behind horses, gain ground, and then quicken away from his fences. And that's what he did to Ahoy Senor. Ahoy Senor set out to make all the running in the Brown Advisory, and Charlie Deutsch was able just to come past him using his jumping, not trying to ask him for more speed to get to the front, and then just ease in front of Ahoy Senor. And he'll, I think he'd prefer a bigger field, given that the better a jumper you are, the more you want to put your rivals under pressure. But he should be favoured for this. He shouldn't be 6-4 against Bravemansgame's 5-4. He should be a shade of odds on based on what we've seen of them thus far. As I said, I still hope that Ahoy Senor will bounce back. But my problem with Ahoy Senor at the moment is, in his early starts over fences, what I would have said was, yeah, he just needs a bit more experience. He'll be fine. He can jump very well most of the time. He makes the occasional mistake, but with experience, he'll iron that out. It's now clear to me that he jumps plain fences fine, and he can't jump ditches. And it's becoming a bit of potentially a mental block for him, that he needs to learn to see a ditch and realize that he's got the scope to take it. Because what he did at Cheltenham it was almost like he could see these ditches coming and going, I don't like these. And he wasn't approaching them with the same confidence he was with playing fences. Interestingly, at Newbury, he made a mistake when he was impressive early in the season. Made a mistake at I think the first ditch, and he also made a mistake at the water jump. So it's these unusual fences that he can't deal with. And I think with extensive schooling, he'll get over that. But he hasn't had the opportunity between Cheltenham and Aintree to have that kind of schooling. So I think we'll probably have the same issue with him again. He will look good at most of his fences, but he will lose ground at a few. And I don't think you can lose ground at your fences against a horse like Presse. I think he could, he's beaten Bravemansgame here last year. And I've always maintained that if you watch that race again, you'll see that Ahoy Senor is just the better horse on the day. There've been a few theories about that Bravemansgame was over the top, that he gave Ahoy Senor too much rope. But if you look at the figures for that last year, compare him to what Bravemansgame was doing previously, he's run up to form. And Ahoy Senor didn't get loose on the lead. He was just relentless there. His jumping was very good over the hurdles, and he kept galloping, and he outstayed Bravemansgame. And he, potentially can outstay Bravemansgame again here if he can cut the mistakes out. But it's very hard, even for me as a fan of Ahoy Senor, to say that he will beat Presse. I think Presse, I think it's very surprising he's not favourite for this.
Presse should be the fav there for Rory. 6-4 best price at the moment. Andy, are you agreeing again? It seems like you guys are agreeing on everything this week.
Yeah, just based on pure time figures, yeah, Presse should be favourite. We're still waiting for Bravemansgame to run beyond the 70 time figure, which is extraordinary for a horse who's considered to be a Grade 1 horse. Presse's done it 3 times this season. 76 he recorded when he won the RSA. Or the Brown Advisor, or whatever you want to call it nowadays. And his stamina was very much the key component as well. That was the only thing we didn't know, whether he would, whether he's capable of achieving at Cheltenham. But he answered that in the affirmative, didn't he? It was a real filthy day. It put a real emphasis on stamina, and he came through that examination with his best ever time figure. He did it at Hardware as well. He took it up from a long way out. I don't think envisaged on Presse picking up, but he probably got there because Ahoy Senor had made all those mistakes at the ditches, which Rory's alluded to. Funny enough, he was really good at the final ditch at the top of the hill, but the 3 other attempts, he dragged his hind legs through them, which Rory's obviously eagle-eyed in spotting. So that's obviously a concern, particularly as the second last at Aintree as well is also a ditch. And when the heat's on, you've got to be able to jump that well at pace. I think it claimed, I think of Kinbaiders last year, didn't it, when it overjumped and left the race for Chantry House. So it is a tricky fence, that one, when you're getting tired. So that's worth bearing in mind. So yeah, just on pure numbers, I think Presse will win in short, without labouring what Rory's already said. Whether I have a bet in this race is open to question, but for podcast purposes, Presse is the pick.
Presse, the pick 6-4 for both the guys. We have 4 races left to cover. Now we have the formerly the Melling Chase, now the Marsh Chase, over just under 2.5 miles. And Fakir Duderi is the 13-8 favourite, ahead of Funambule Savola at 6-1. So Royale 9-1, Captain Guinness 10-1, along with All Mankind and Mr. Fisher. St Calvados 12-1, Hitman 14-1, 20-1 bar. 10 runners here, Andy. Take us away.
Yeah, I mean, we should never fall into the category of backing horses because we like them. That's a one-way ticket to the poorhouse. You've got to take an objective view, but there is something just very pleasing on the eye and heartwarming about Fakir Duderis. I think he's been very well campaigned, by the way, by Jose Oberon. He's recognised that he wants to try and avoid Ahoy at all costs. Yes, he took him on at Thurles early on in the season, but he didn't take him on at Cheltenham. He didn't want to fall into that category again. Other than that, he's been blemish free this season. He was good at Clonmel early on the year, good at Ascot when that was a proper test that day, outstaying two for Gold, who really dogged it out from the front, and he got the better of him. Just like I say, showing his real qualities and his attitude. He's all there, and obviously he's won at this track before. He's fresh and well. He's had 42 days break, so there should be no excuses on that front. The only problem is the price, of course. Everyone else has cottoned onto it, and the bookmakers are not going to give you any, dangle too many carrots here at sort of 7-4. So again, it's one of those days where you've got the likes of Jonbon, you've got the Presses, and their Fakir Duder is the obvious standout horses on figures and form and the way that they've been campaigned. I'd love to be able to come up with something imaginative that I thought was a value alternative, but if I can't, then it's no point me trying to go down that route. So I'll leave that to Rory if he's got something else that he'd like to throw his cap into the ring with. But I'm just going to play with a straight back with this one as well with Fakir Duderis.
Rory, take it away.
Yeah, lots of negatives for other horses coming into this. And of course, Fakir Dudery won this last season and missed Cheltenham this time around to come here fresh again. He did have a hard race at Ascot last time out. Those are pretty tough conditions. But that's also an issue for one or two who are behind him that day. So he makes plenty of appeal at the top of the market, but I probably will have a little bit of a dig each way against him. Not because I think he's particularly weak, but his short price means there is potential place value there. A lot of these simply don't stay beyond 2 miles, but there's no alternative until the end of the month. So a lot of those who look like 2 milers are worth giving a chance at this trip too. But I'm not particularly keen to back any of them. All Mankind would have made loads of appeal if he'd come here fresh, as Dan Skelton said he would. When he won the Old Roan earlier in the season, Dan Skelton said he will have one run and then he will run in the Melling Chase at Aintree. And I thought that's a bold call so early in the season, because I'm not going to be tempted to take him to Cheltenham. I'm going to give him one prep and then the Melling Chase. And then he's run 2 absolute stinkers in races you wouldn't have thought he would have gone for. He's run him in the Peterborough Chase at Huntingdon quite reasonably quickly, really, after Aintree, when I'd have thought he'd have been looking at a spring campaign, so a prep run maybe in February at Newbury, and then here, and then he's run him over hurdles in the National Spirit. He ran a horrible race there, so he's a hard horse to be confident about now. Whereas I think if he'd come in here having not run since October, he'd probably be about a 7-2 chance, wouldn't he? But he's difficult to back at the moment. This is his trip, and this is his track as well. But hard to back him with confidence. I really like Funambule Civilat as a horse, but he's shown twice this season that he doesn't stay 2.5 miles. Hitman's not a horse I can absolutely trust. Listen, you can make a case for Hitman, particularly based on his seconds at Exeter in November, but I've never warmed to him as a horse. And again, I'm a little bit wary of backing Nicholls horses. Mr. Fisher was well behind the favourite last time at Ascot, and he seems to save all his good runs for Grade 2s. He's a very good horse in Grade 2 company. When he's raised to Grade 1s, he just falls apart. So he's a hard horse to fancy here. So Calvados, I can make a case for if he hadn't run at Ascot, and Paul Nicholls pulled him out of the Ryanair because of the ground, which is an absolutely bizarre standpoint. Although in fairness, he'd made the point before Cheltenham. He said when St Calvados ran badly at Ascot and he burst a blood vessel that day, Paul Nicholls said, I don't think he wants to go right-handed, and I don't think he wants soft ground. But he'd run 2 huge races in the King George. The last 2 King Georges, he's looked the best horse on the race both times, but just a non-stayer. So the fact that the idea he doesn't want soft ground has been disproven by the fact that he was deemed to be a heavy ground specialist in his early days for Harry Whittington. And the idea he doesn't want to go right-handed is kind of blown up by the fact that he's shaped so well on those King Georges.
Yeah.
So Paul pulls him out of the Ryanair, which means he's reasonably fresh here. And of course, you know, whether you could have backed him in that race, given that he pulled up at Ascot and he burst a blood vessel, I could see him bouncing back because I think he is the best 2.5 miler in Britain and has been for the last 2 seasons. But he's missed 2 Ryanairs. He missed the Ryanair in 2021 because the ground was too quick for him, good to soft. And he missed it this year because it was too soft for him, soft. So there is literally no ground that suits him, according to 2 different trainers. I don't really believe that. I think he'd be absolutely fine on good to soft or soft ground here. It's just a case of whether that Ascot run has put a hole in him. And again, the issue with whether you really want to be piling into Paul Nicholls horses. But he's 12-1. And for a horse who is, in my opinion, the best racehorse over this trip in the UK, that's too big a price. So I could risk him at that. And the other snidey bet you could have, although I think a few people have cottoned onto it already, is Paint the Dream, who will love conditions. Ran the race of his life to win by an easy 15 lengths at Newbury last time out, and is liable to run his race. Whereas a few of these you can see running flat or not staying the trip or disappointing for various reasons. Whereas Paint the Dream is liable to run his races coming off a career best run. But he, you know, if he hadn't run at Newbury, he would have been 66-1, and I probably would have backed him at that because I like Paint the Dream and I think he would have been suited by this race. But now I think there's a chance that he gets overbet. 20-1, I think, is fair enough. But I can see him being 14s or 16s because I think he has the look of sort of a wise guy horse about him. And I know a few people who've backed him at the big prices when the market opens. And that makes an awful lot of sense. You have to realize that there's a minimum price for a horse like that as well. And I think we're getting close to that at the moment. So if you're getting 20s or more, I wouldn't put you off. If you're taking 12s or 14s, you've got to look at his overall rating and where he fits in the race as well. So it's a value call. But worse horses than him have run well in this race in the past.
Paint the Dream 20-1 pretty much across the board. St Calvados 12-1 with Paddy's, Betfair and Bet Victor. On then to the 405. It is the Topham Handicap Chase. We heard from Rory in the first show, in the Thursday preview, that this was a race that he liked to try and solve. So we'll come to him after we've heard from Andy. But Mr. Coffee is the 10-1 favourite ahead of 5-star Getaway at 12s alongside Senior Citizen. Fantastic Lady, Killer Clown, both 14-1. Sizing Potsy and Royal Rendezvous and Mac Totty and Spirit of the Games all 16-1. Notebook 20s, Pink Eyed Pedro 20s, Batgio 20s with Palmer's Hill and Tamarok Matan and Janika 22-1 bigger than that. I'm not going to go through all 30, Andy. But who have you fallen on for the Topham?
Luckily, neither am I. Be here all day. Look, it's fairly straightforward formula to this race is to look towards horses that have been around the track before. Several stand out. Obviously, Peter Bowen, you have to respect him. I think 4 of the last 14 winners have gone to Peter Bowen. So, likes of Mac Totty and Frankie de Burle certainly come onto the shortlist. And Mac Totty won over the fence early in the season. But chasing him home was Senior Citizen, who has got 2 really good runs under his belt around this track. So he clearly likes the Aintree fences. And I thought he ran really well last year behind the very well handicapped Love Live Laugh. I think I can't remember who did the podcast with him. It might have been Rory himself who did it. And we both agreed on Love Live Love Laugh. But I thought he ran as well as ever. Nothing wrong with his run behind Totty. Probably on that sort of verging into sort of winter soft. I think there's a difference between the drying soft that we got here last year and the winter soft going into the autumn period that when he took part against Totty. Again, the ground had been too soft for him the last time out, but he ran another good race around a similar track for configuration Newbury behind the aforementioned Paint the Dream. And he looks as though he's been prepared especially for this. It's blatantly obvious, there's not many races that can run him in. He's had a big break since that one. He had an even bigger break between the November run and the one at Newbury. And the faster the ground, the better for him. So if they don't get too much rain and there isn't too much predicted between now and Friday, the better the chances of Alan King's horse. And Alan King's horse are in good form at the moment. His chasers, his hurdlers, and his flat horses. Thought he's Major Dundee ran a blinder in the Scottish National the other day. So yeah, this might well be his day in the sun. And whichever way you strip it down, at sort of, was it 10, 12 to 1? You can get sort of 6, 7, 8. I think you
12
8
to
places
1
as well. Yeah,
Sky Bet go 8 places, but they're 10 to 1. But I'm sure others are going to follow suit fairly quickly. But 12 to 1 are with.
It all depends how sort of brave or unbrave you want to be, really. I mean, I'd be more than happy to take 12 to 1 6 places if that's available. So yeah, Senior Citizen for me, with favourable mentions for Totty and the horse that finished placed last year as well, Pink Eye Pedro. He fell the last day over hurdles, which was a bit uncharacteristic of him, but he's the kind of horse that always finishes in the frame, so he's definitely one for play spots.
Senior Citizen 12 to 1, as we said. Totty 16 to 1. That stand out with Coral and Labrooks, and Pink Eye Pedro 20 to 1, pretty much across the boards. Who have you fallen on here for the top, and Rory?
Oh, well, remarkably similar to Andy, but a slightly different result in the end. Same process. I've gone with Totty, who beat Senior Citizen here in the Grand Sefton over course and distance, and is actually £4 better off because he's disappointed since. Well, he ran here in the Beecher in December, and the yard had been very, very quiet since he won. Typically, Peter Bowen's stable tends to flourish kind of from this meeting onwards. He's got a very good record in this race. And then he does very well through the summer races, like the summer plates tend to come up. There's the handicaps at Market Raisin, and then the winter months tend to be poor months for Peter Bowen as a rule. So when the sun comes out again, we see spring. That's when you tend to get an upturn in fortunes. So I'd kind of ignore what Totty has done in recent starts and hark back to what he did here in November when winning over course and distance on good to soft ground off the same mark. And we've seen before, always winning, won this race 3 times. And I think the second time he won it, he was 66 to 1 in the morning. And you couldn't fancy him on the form that he'd shown. But what you find was that every time these horses of Peter's came back to Aintree, they just bounced right back to form. So I think that will be that'll be the same with Totty, and probably with Frankie de Burlay as well. Again, who's run poorly on his last couple of starts, and who was actually behind Totty here in November, but he had good form early in the summer on quicker ground. If there was no rain, I'd give him a chance, but I suspect it's going to be on the soft side of good at the very best, and that will suit Totty slightly better. So Totty's the obvious one of the two, but I quite like the booking of Brendan Powell for Frankie de Burlay, and I'll toss a couple of quid at him at big prices. But Totty appeals on plenty of fronts. One horse that I probably would have backed, but for an absolutely bizarre decision to run him at Cheltenham, is Discordantly, who's not a horse I've liked enormously, but he showed at Leopardstown in his penultimate start that connections have been getting him wrong. He doesn't want 3 miles plus in the mud. He wants reasonably good ground and 2 mile 5, 2.5, that kind of intermediate trip. And he bounced right back to form when making most of the running to score at Leopardstown under Robbie Parr early in March. And Connection said afterwards, and Kit Harrington said straight after the race, we've got this horse wrong. We've had him pegged as a stayer, but actually his only 2 wins over fences have come over this trip when ridden forward, and that's what we'll do with him in the future. And then they ran him in the Ultimate at Cheltenham. I just think that's an awful preparation for this race. If they'd given him a break and brought him back for this, he would have been a big player. But I don't think, he ran on the Ultima and ran a stinker. Unsurprisingly, he's a moody horse. He just seemed to be getting his confidence back in his previous start. He might bounce back again, but that puts me off. And if he hadn't run at Cheltenham, I probably would have had him on my short list for this race. But given that they went and ran him over 3 miles one again, and he had a bad experience, it puts me off backing him again here.
Discordantly put off 33-1, but certainly not a selection there for Rory. But Frankie de Burde 40-1. That is with Paddy's and Betfair, but the main selection for him is Mac Totty 16-1, as I said, and also a positive mention from Andy as well. Onto the 440, the Sefton Novices Hurdle. Banbridge is the 130 favourite ahead of Skytastic at 6-1, Crystal Glory 8-1, Gelino Bello 8-1 as it stands, Green Book 10-1, Staghorn 12-1, Duke of Bronte 12-1, 14-1 bar. Andy.
I'll be quite hopeful of one in this race at a nice price. Not quite the price that he was when I put it up Monday, but Crystal Glory was the anchor leg of my each way lucky 15 that the guys at head office got me to do. I was just scanning through the prices and looking at potential ricks, if you like, ahead at advance of some races that might cut up and withdraw. There'll be 1 or 2 withdrawals here, then everywhere. And I just couldn't understand why Crystal Glory at time recording or time when I did it was 20-1, considering that Green Book was 12-1. He absolutely lapped that horse at Haydock in that real grueling test behind Hillcrest. Now, Hillcrest was quite predictably disappointing at Cheltenham. He just didn't fancy it. He's probably remembered that race because he had such a bruising encounter at the Merseyside track that he thought, sod this for a game of soldiers when he got to Cheltenham. But Crystal Glory's had that extra time to recover, albeit he didn't get involved in the scrimmaging for the early pace. It was a race that was obviously fought out from the front. There were likes of High Stakes, Green Book and Hillcrest all kept having a go at each other. But Crystal Glory started really well. And I noticed he finished 41 lengths ahead of a horse that I quite like called Scipion, who won next time out at Chepstow the other day for the Tom Lacey stable. And Scipion's now back number. He ran really well in that good race at Warwick early on in the season. I think he finished second that day. So it was a real examination of a horse's stamina. And Crystal Glory came through it in flying colours. So we know he stays the trip. He's got a progressive profile. I think the ground will be absolutely ideal for him. He won't be too soft or too quick come Friday. I just think he's a horse. He's a horse that I like. And although he's not going to be the price that I hoped he might be, he's still around about the 8-1 mark, which doesn't look too bad. Obviously, Banbridge, he's a deserved favourite off the back of his win at Cheltenham. I kicked myself for not putting him up in that boys' race because he was one on my shortlist, but I somehow managed to talk myself out of it close to the day. That was a schoolboy error. And you've got to respect Skytastic as well as clearly going the right way. But I think Crystal Glory, other than Banbridge, brings the best graded form into the race. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So 8-1 each way looks a fair shout for me.
Crystal Glory 8-1 there with Paddy's, Betfair 888, and a couple of others, Boyles as well. Rory.
I don't have a tremendously strong view in the race, but the one horse I thought would outrun his odds is my Bobby Dazzler, who's certainly north of 20-1. Ex-pointer for Mel Rowley, course and distance winner by a wide margin in December. That was on heavy ground. I don't think he needs the heavy ground. He was just well handicapped there. He was racing off a mark of 118. He won by 21 lengths without being asked to do too much. I was impressed by that. And he's then finished fourth in a really warm handicap hurdle at Cheltenham in his next start. Again, having gone up to a mark of 132, he was just a couple of lengths behind Botox Ha that day, who went on and won the National Spirit Hurdle at Fomwell in his next start. Dolphin Square and Kansas City Chief came into it in very good form off wins and dominated the finish. But you had decent horses in behind who've franked the form since as well. He was disappointing. I put him up at Doncaster in the River Dawn, not the River Dawn. Yes, it is the River Dawn, on his next start. I thought he would run really well there, and he ran okay. He was third behind Mahler Mission and the Real Whacker, but I thought he would run better than that. He was backed into favoritism, and it turns out he struck into himself on the race, suffered an overreach, and I think he's a little bit better than that form suggests. And given he's got form at the track before, has got plenty of experience for a novice and stays well, I thought he would hit the frame. And he would need to do better than he did last time out if he's going to do that. But I think his overall form suggests that there's a bigger performance in him. And I can see him bouncing back and hitting the frame at 20, 25 to 1.
Yeah, 25 to 1 best price as it stands there for Rory's selection. On then to the final race on the day of the Friday. No prices here, sadly. So just going to ask you guys if there's any horses to basically keep an eye on as prices come out in the Park Palace Ponies Handicap Hurdle. No point me running through the runners here. Andy, I'll hand over to you if anyone that the listeners and viewers should keep an eye on. I assume it's 5 to 1 now. Price is probably coming out around 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Yeah, very doubtful I'll be putting anything up in this race. But yeah, just maybe want to keep an eye on who clocked a good number last time out from a stable in good form. That's On Public. Oliver Greenall's horses in good form. I think he's had 4 winners recently. I think his last 2 horses have both won. Took ages for Oliver to get his horses into top gear, but On Public was one of the ones that sort of kickstart that trend. Quite like the lad who rides it as well, Toby Wynn. His figure, like I say, his figure when he won at Newcastle was extraordinarily good for the grade. So he'd be one I'd be mildly interested at, but I'll probably pass it over to Rory. He might have a stronger view than me.
Rory?
I do have a stronger view, but it's on the same horse. I made On Public my nap of the meeting at a preview I did last night. He's a horse I liked a lot as a juvenile. I napped him at Cheltenham last year because I thought his French form tied in very well with horses who were much short. He was a sort of 25, 28 to 1 Andy Post for the Fred Winter. And I thought his French form looked really good, but he ran appallingly. And although he gradually got his form back this season, but he still hadn't found the same level of form as he had in France. And then I was with him last time at Newcastle. I thought the drop in grade would see him bounce back, and he was really impressive. He really found his form. He was given a lovely ride by Toby Wynn into that to sort of come from off the pace. He jumped well. He seemed to take a lot of confidence from it as well. And I know that he's got the ability to defy a rise in the weights. This is one of the weaker races at the meeting. But I get the impression that Ollie Greenall, who's a pretty shrewd handler, has had this race in mind for a long time. Hence, Toby riding him last time out, because this is a race for conditionals and amateurs. And I suspect that this is a race that Ollie has mapped out a while ago for On Public. The handicapper hasn't merged him. He's back up to 125, which is an £8 rise. But that was a well-contested race at Newcastle, despite the fact that it was a lower grade. And the form that he was showing last season before Cheltenham suggested this mark of 125 is very fair. And Toby Wynn has impressed me. His striker this season must be pretty good under rules, because he's 6 from 38 this season, but he's ridden a few winners and looked very competent for the Greenall Yard this season. And I think he's got a very big chance in a pretty ordinary contest.
Good chance in an ordinary contest for On Public. What kind of price would you be hoping for?
Well, that's the tricky one. Anything in double figures would be very interesting, but I think it's a very hard race to price up, and I can see some odds compilers looking at that race and saying, that it was a class 4 at Newcastle. But, those handicaps don't tend to be very strong, and putting him in at 16 to 1. But I could also see people seeing the promise in that, looking at the form that he showed last year and putting him in as sort of second favorite here. So I'll be keeping a very close eye on who goes up first with this. And I can see whoever decides to go up with that was a weak race last time, and putting him in at double figures, getting hit very, very quickly. And hopefully there tends to be agreement among firms about these races, and sometimes they all agree on prices that are too big. So I will be hoping that that's what happens here. But yeah, I'll be refreshing my screen throughout the afternoon and trying to nab the early prices.
Roy, I'll text you producer Liam's number, and you can drop him a message asking for a slow edit so it doesn't come out in time. On Public, a strong one there before we get prices out in the last on Friday from Rory. Thank you very much to Rory and to Andy for sharing their insight on both Thursday and Friday's racing at Aintree. We're going to be recording a Saturday preview as well tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you haven't listened or watched Thursday's then do go back and do that now. Some great insight from both Andy and Rory, and some strong joint selections as well back in there. So fingers crossed those go well. Fingers crossed for some winners in today as well. Do download the oddschecker app so you can get the best prices, bookie offers, free bets, and everything else straight to the app, including Andy's tips every morning of racing. Thanks to the guests again. Thank you to you for watching and to listening to this. And please do, as ever, ensure that you're gambling responsibly.